Democrats are finally starting to realize just how badly they've screwed up with Gen Z. Numerous polls have come out in the past couple of months showing that Gen Z is actually fairly based, and many of them are starting to lean right. While it breaks down to mostly males shifting to the right and women shifting slightly left, all in all, this means the future generation, Gen Z, is likely going to be at the very least moderately conservative populist. And I can tell you why. In this story from Business Insider, they give you the reason very simply. Meet the disconnected youth, a growing group of Gen Zers who aren't working or going to school. Heavens me, we are generating our own group of hikikomori. If you're not familiar with what that means, it's a Japanese term for shut-in. Young men who lock themselves in their rooms and they don't go to work, they don't go to school. Some people call them NEET. NEET. What does it mean? It's not an employment, education, or training, I think. I could be wrong. But we have this video clip from MSNBC. And this was tweeted out by Carly Bond saying, "Holy crap, I can't believe Morning Schmuck actually aired this." This is Scott Galloway, a professor at NYU, talking about how screwed Gen Z is. And you know what? I'm going to say this. I'm going to play this video, and I hope people, I know many of you are not Gen Z, but I do hope you understand what this means. And to those that are Gen Z, I want you to understand, you see, the Democrat politicians in various states have been selling your birthright. I do believe that we as Americans do have some entitlements, and those entitlements are, we are entitled to stand on the shoulders of giants. Those who came before us planted trees whose shade they knew they would never sit beneath so that we could. And that's how it's supposed to be. I build or buy a house. I grow up. I get old. I die. My children inherit that house. They can either sell it, live in it. They share that. What I produced is given to them. And through this process for hundreds of thousands of years, humans have made the lives of their children and the lives of general humanity better. But this time, here in the United States, what we're seeing now is that young people are not inheriting anything. Our country is being stripped of its resources. Its borders are being ripped open, and the birthright of the coming generations given away to non-citizens. Let me play this clip for you.
For the first time in our nation's history, a 30-year-old man or woman isn't doing as well as his or her parents were at 30. That is the social compact breaking down. People aged 30 to 34, 60% of them in 1990 had one child. Now it's 27%. People are opting out of America. They're not optimistic about it. They're not having kids. Young people aren't having sex. They're not meeting. They're not mating. The pool of emotionally and economically viable men shrinks every day, which lessens household formation. So we have a real issue. Young people are enraged. So it turns every cut, every movement into an opportunistic infection because, quite frankly, they are just pissed off. They look up, they see wealth, exceptional wealth across my generation and people in certain industries, and they are really struggling. Their purchasing power is going down, and the incumbents create artificial scarcity on campus. We take pride in rejecting 90% of our applicants, so the incumbents who already have a degree see their degree go up in value. We get very concerned with housing and traffic once we own the housing. Housing permits are sequestered from young people. Housing prices have gone from $290 to $420 in the last 4 years. So a young person, a house, stocks that I don't own skyrocket in value. Let's have COVID relief and flush the markets and take assets way up, because if 1 million people dying would be bad, it would be tragic if I got less wealthy. And we're doing it on their credit card. Young people have every reason to be enraged, and every issue they see, they look up, they get angry, and they see someone doing better than them. And then every day it is speedballed in their face that they are failing, that they are not doing as well as everyone around them. We have lost the script. Our kids are more anxious, they're more depressed, they're more obese, they're more addicted, and we have made a purposeful decision to let this happen by ensuring the people around this table stay wealthy at the cost of young people.
Yep, and it's been increasingly getting worse. Now, I've heard this narrative going back for a long time. I, of course, a millennial, Nearing 40 years old. Why, I have certainly accumulated wealth in my day, and Timcast is growing and expanding. Thanks to you guys who watch the show and support the work we do, and I am grateful for that. It's a lot of hard work, and I basically do a morning show and a nightly show. I work probably around 16 hours every single day, and that's the grind, man. That's the grind. The American dream still exists, but there is a functional failure that is happening. Donald Trump, in my opinion, represents an opportunity for young people, especially young men, and they're recognizing this. Everything you just heard from this guy on MSNBC, no doubt, is a message that young people are hearing, and they are connecting with Donald Trump. Now, he's talking about young men, but I will stress this point again to make sure people understand. First, the point being simply, we all stand on the shoulders of giants. I didn't invent construction. I'm here in this beautiful new studio. You can see there's trees right there. How do I point? There you go. Trees right above me. Because you can see through the window of the studio into the larger portion of the building and outside. It's tremendous. Someone had to devise the means by which to produce all of these materials. And because of that knowledge passed down, and the resources and the machines and the mechanisms by which we can mold aluminum, we're able to have this massive building, corrugated steel and insulation and wood and all of that stuff. We inherited the knowledge and the machinery and the mechanics and everything to build it all. Even when someone builds a new factory to mill the wood or whatever, to make the metals and the steel or whatever, it is the machines that already exist, and it is the knowledge and the components that have been built throughout generations. It's not just about economics. It's about culture. When we all get older, it is an obligation of the older generation to provide to the younger generation. That was always the point, wasn't it? At some point, that changed. I don't know why. I can't tell you. But right now, what we are seeing is a large concentration of wealth with the boomer generation. And I do believe a large component of this is pushing back the retirement age. Older people retire, and they say, I did my job, I worked for 30, 40 years, and now it's time to retire and hand this job off. And with that job comes a better salary, better opportunity, but that's not happening. People are working forever. Nobody's retiring. They're working longer hours than ever. And young people have no opportunity to get their foot in the door. How can a young person start a business when they can't afford the rent? How can they start a family when they can't buy a house? So here we are. This article from Business Insider was interesting to me. The disconnected youth. They say a growing group of Gen Zers who aren't working or are going to school because there's no launch pad anymore. We have not just created generations of those hoarding wealth and refusing to give it up, but people who are not having children themselves. And, I think a great example of this is Bill Maher. Here's an older guy who is out of touch with politics, out of touch with reality, extremely wealthy, doesn't have kids, and doesn't care me. All right. Well, I tell you where this goes. Idle hands, my friends, the devil's playground. Share of disconnected youth age 18 to 24. You've got two options. You can either figure out this problem and help the next generation live their lives as they desire. And it's a combination of nature and nurture. That means that these people want to have families. They want to have a place to call their own. They want to be able to protect their children. And then there's also the social components as well and the cultural components. But if you ignore this, you get revolution. One way or another, you will get revolution. And I tell you, when the young people say enough already, you ain't winning. The aging population will just have to sit back and watch as the young people take over. And the worst case scenario would be something like the Culture Revolution. Young people putting dunce caps on innocent people and accusing them of wrongdoing. Right now, we have the share of disconnected youth, 18 to 24. We can see as of 2020 to 2022, it's 13.8, 13.2%. If we go back to 1998, it was 10.3. So it has increased by about 3 points, 3%. I'm not super concerned about that 3% growth. I mean, it is a problem, right? But from 10.5 to they're showing a 3% swing. You could scale this thing out going back earlier than 1990. Maybe we see something else. But I will tell you this. We have told generation after generation, go to college. They took on debt to do so. They didn't understand what the debt was. And this is the funny thing about the student loan forgiveness. First, there was a funny thing that happened a couple weeks ago where the post-millennial took a statement from me out of context, and then all of these people, it was like the weirdest thing ever. It's like, oh, man. It was a statement I made where I said we should freeze interest rates. If you took out a loan, you got to pay it back, but we can at least suspend the predatory interest, and then you can pay back what you owe. It's something I've always said for several years. And then this tweet gets put out of context, this X post, and people are like claiming that I was personally in favor of Biden's forgiveness plan. Yeah, no, what Biden is doing is unconstitutional. You get money, you got to pay it back. But I can respect that these young people did not understand the predatory system that they were being trapped into. I know people personally who took out a loan for 20 grand and now they owe 50 and they've already paid back 30. And it's like, wow, well, hold on. What's going on there? Because of interest rates. If we keep playing this game where we say, no forgiveness in any way, because I said Trump should do forgiveness. He should do it right. Suspend the interest, pay back what you were given. Nobody gets a free ride. But assaulting your income permanently, I mean, that's going to cause problems for us. If we do not get a handle on this, this country is doomed. I think people need to realize that. They talk about how you need to have kids and all of that stuff, and that's true. Gen Z is getting more based. Great. We need to figure out how to get Gen Z homes at affordable prices. We need to figure out how they can start families, how they can start interacting, and we can break through these cultural crises that we're dealing with. There is no answer that is simply pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you should figure it out. There's not much to figure out anymore. People are working longer and longer, which means there's less openings. Non-citizens are being given preferential treatment and money. It's not an option for young people now. Those jobs don't exist. Here's how it used to be. You would, apply for a restaurant job. After a summer working there, they'd say, you're going back to school. Why don't you come back next summer and, work again? And they'd say, sure. They come back next summer and he says, look, you've got experience. How about you become an assistant manager? We'll give you $1 raise or something. And then by the time that young person got out of school, they already had managerial experience and they could apply for a job and say, I was a manager at this restaurant or something like that. Going back even further, kids worked with their parents. Your dad was a blacksmith. When you were old enough, he'd say, go hand me, those ingots over there, grab one and bring it over here and I'll show you what I'm doing. And then when the kid got older, he'd teach him how to do it. And then that kid would was an apprentice to his father. And then eventually he took over and the dad said, I'm too old to be doing this. I can help you out a little bit, but I think it's time you took over and started a family of your own. Not anymore. Now the parents go off to work and leave their kids to an institutionalized learning facility with strangers and just assume everything's going to be okay. And it's certainly not with the indoctrination that's going on. These kids aren't learning any real skills for real life. They don't know how to work. They don't know how to produce. I don't blame them for it. I blame the schools. Our schools in this country do nothing to teach people how to actually function in the real world. Hey, I'm successful. Why is that? Well, I didn't go to school. I mean, I did until I was 14. I was homeschooled before. Then I went to grade school. And then at 14 years old, I stopped going to high school after like 2 or 3 months, was homeschooled again, never got my GED or diploma. And here I am. Why? My family, they're entrepreneurs. I come from a line of people who tried to figure things out. We didn't lose that, I suppose. I remember my grandfather. One day I'd been staying with him, and there was a loaf of bread, and I made a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and then I looked, and there was mold on the bread, and I went, And he's like, what's wrong? And I was like, it's mold. And he grabbed it, and he just jammed half the thing in his mouth, and he goes, do you have any idea what we ate during the Depression? And I was like, what year was my grandpa born? He said it was bad. Man, back in the day, you had to figure things out. And I think that's it. That not about eating moldy bread, but because you can get sick from that. But the idea was figure it out. Otherwise, you're in trouble. Yeah, I'm lucky I got that. I'm lucky that I come from a family of people saying, figure it out on your own. What we've done now is we've put our young people into institutionalized learning facilities where everyone gets a trophy no matter what you do. What do you think happens to the participation trophy generation? You compete in a race and they say, everybody gets a trophy, you are here. So what happens? These young people are graduating from school, and it's millennials too, millennials and many Gen Z. And they're thinking, I don't understand the concept of build and receive. I don't understand the concept of invest and grow, because we built systems that did not teach these. More importantly, we abandoned young people, and we're still doing it to this day. I think there's going to be a reckoning, and it may be intentional. This country's been gutted from starting a long time ago. Maybe Yuri Bezmenov was right. The communists infiltrated our institutions, and what we've done is we've turned schools are bad in the first place, these industrialized, institutionalized learning facilities. But now what we have, young people basically just sitting around, twiddling their thumbs, playing video games, wasting away. Here's a scary thought. There's a video that I like to reference. It's of a bunch of young people, and it's like children talking in an interview in like the 50s, and they sound like adults. And it was because that's how life always used to be. Kids would play and be silly, sure, but kids would, very quickly around, puberty and stuff, they're imitating adults and behaving or attempting to behave the way adults behave. Of course, kids will be silly and all this stuff, but nowadays, kids are being raised by other kids, creating some kind of broken, circular, daycare institution. It used to be. Or I'll put it this way. When I was a kid and my family opened a business, on the weekends, I'm surrounded by adults, seeing adults work, learning how to work with adults, running the cash register and giving change and doing math. My friends were learning from each other. They were competing amongst themselves. It was almost tribalist and excised from society. Here I was at like 11 years old, talking to a 30-year-old guy who wants a coffee and making change and explaining the drink, and I can make all these different drinks. And then my friends were discussing, nonsense, pop culture stuff, things that mattered very little to the real world. Now, by all means, you can say, but I love the music in the 90s, and we grew up, we hang out. I love Pokemon cards and all these things, and the big and culture around video games and all that. Sure, all that's fine. Hobbies, art, professional esports and strategy games, all that's absolutely fine. But it never really mattered to the industry, never really mattered to those who wanted to make good money. What we're seeing now is certainly you can become a professional video gamer, a professional card player and things like this, and that's great. But what happened was these young kids were building an isolated culture, a vacuum among themselves. I experienced this. I feel like that was something that I experienced when I was in grade school and I was in public school, and I was fortunate enough to get away from that. What is that going to bring you to in the future? Young people are going to be detached from the previous generation. They're not going to understand the basics of finance and taxes until they're forced to do it. Why is it that our young people don't know how to do taxes until they're 20-something years old? Many of the young people that are going to school because they're told they should have never had a real job, so they don't know how to make money. And the crazy thing, you've got young people who think, I need money, I better get a job. I got some advice for all you guys. If you need money, you need only ask for it. There is no difference. All of it is the same. This world is built upon voluntary exchange. No, hold on. Yeah, and war and conquest. But I mean, in this country, our economy is voluntary exchange. Granted, the government steals stuff, and that's only going to get worse based on what's happening here with young people. But what I mean is this. There's an opportunity for you. Sometimes it's difficult. You have to, let's do this. Treat it like a video game. I was thinking about this the other day. I played World of Warcraft. How many video games? If you guys play Fallout or something, okay, many of you play video games. If you don't, this one's for the people who are sitting around playing video games trying to figure out their lives. When you first start the game, it's rough. You have nothing. You're a low level. There's areas you can't go. That's the same way the world works. So if you're sitting here frustrated, thinking to yourself like, why aren't I living in a house? Why don't I have more? It's like, well, the reality is when you went to school and got your degree, you never leveled up. You are still just level 1. And there are other people who got out of school at a very young age or didn't go. And so they started their quest much earlier than you, and they're already level 30. So of course they're going to have these things. And the higher your level, the more skills you obtain, the more people learn about your abilities, the more money you will make. So, I remember being in my early 20s, and I was working on nonprofit stuff, and I was really good at it. And me and my friends started our own company. We started making money, and it was difficult. because we didn't know enough about the machine. Had we been properly trained as young people and apprenticed and taught how the world works, we certainly could have had a successful business at 18 years old. Instead, it took me till I was in my late 20s, 30. And even I had a heads up with working the family business and things like this. But that's how it used to be. Now, these young people are 24 and they still don't know where to even begin. What skills do you have? What skills can you trade? Here's the terrifying reality. As kids raise themselves and these problems continue, they won't have any. You're going to get a 26-year-old, and I don't know, I can write an essay. I'm like, well, I don't need an essay written. You want to go work for a media company, I guess. How are they going to make money? Sell ads? Well, that's diluted now, so they can't do it. It's market saturation. Can you make a phone? Can you build a car? What can you do? None of that? I got bad news. If you're in your mid to late 20s and you're just now learning these skills, you're competing with tons of people who already did. School has been a big problem. I think that's part of the solution. We need apprenticeships back, but I will stress this to all of my good conservative friends. We must solve this problem right now. We may be dealing with a lost generation, millennials and Gen Z. Gen Z seems to be on a course correction, which is good, but for right now, we've got 30-year-olds, like 26 to like 33, in this pocket of a lost generation that has a high rate of a lack of skills, unlikely to have a family, can't afford to rent, isn't doing anything. We have to figure out how to help these people and how to help them help themselves. In the meantime, I think this ultimately spills over to angry young men moving on into adulthood and getting closer and closer to middle age, realizing that they've been screwed over. Their birthright is being given away to non-citizens and to foreign war. And I wonder how many of them will vote for Donald Trump. We'll see. I'll leave it there. Next segment is coming up at 6 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.